Welcome, everybody. This is our last of our 8 series of mini retreats. This is the last one. And today we'll be exploring the 7th factor of awakening, the 7th factor of enlightenment, which is equanimity, upekkha in Pali. I'm not going to say too much about it right now. I'd like to get started with practice. And this will be a we could say, semi-guided practice today. So sitting yourself in a comfortable seat. On a cushion on the floor, in a chair, maybe on a couch. Looks like everybody's inside today. Settling into your body. Letting the body, the heart, and the mind relax. And settle into really just simply being here. Here being wherever you are. Feeling the body. You might do a scan from the toes to the head to the toes, and just checking out where there's tightness, where there's contraction. And as you move through those areas, allowing it to soften, allowing some release, not forcing anything. The softening and the release comes about by relaxing just a little bit more. Staying really present. And just a couple of words about equanimity. So opening the ear doors. Equanimity can be described as the balance or the evenness of the mind, heart, and body, and the balance of energy. This quality, we could say, this quality of equanimity, this quality of heart-mind that remains centered without inclining towards one extreme or the other. It's sometimes described as immeasurable impartiality. One of the primary energies that counters equanimity, that usurps equanimity, that keeps us from this balanced evenness of mind and heart are all the various forms of fear. Often underneath irritation, anger, nervousness, uneasiness, anxiety, worry, dread, panic. Underneath all of that, and underneath not so far with some of it, is some degree of fear. So this morning with our sit, we'll work with these varying manifestations that you may not call fear, but that fear is underneath, in relationship to the balance of the heart mind. And we'll begin our practice, our sitting practice this morning. Bringing attention into the body, as we already have done to some degree. So now reconnecting with your body, sitting in this very simple way. A whole body sense of the posture, noticing the touch points, contact points. Your bottom against the cushion, the floor. Maybe the contact of the back against the back of a chair or couch. Noticing touch points with hands, touching each other, or legs and hands touching. Keeping it very simple. Sitting, touching. And when the breath becomes apparent in your field of mindful presence, then turning your mindful attention directly into the sensations of breath. And we'll spend some moments now allowing our attention to settle and focus. Bringing the interest energy, mindful presence, and begin focusing the attention in a gentle way, but with intention, on the sensations of the in-breath and the sensations of the out-breath. Finding your anapana spot, your mindfulness of breathing spot. And we'll spend about 10 minutes letting the energy of our practice gather. The mind, heart, and body gather. Bringing mindful focus of attention directly into the in-breath sensations and the out-breath sensations, keeping it really simple. Returning again and again as you need to when the attention wanders off. No judgment, no discussion about this. Just a recognition and just beginning again. Continuing to settle, gathering in the energy. With the potential of a lightness of being in relationship to connecting with this beautiful breath, the sensations of this beautiful breath. And now gently, not in a jarring or sudden way, but gently, bring to mind something from this past week, during your meditation or during your daily life, or maybe something since we began this mini retreat together that created some degree of unease, maybe some degree of anxiety or worry or tension or nervousness, some degree of fear, if you will. Just bring it to mind gently. Stay in the body and notice how that unease or anxiety, worry, nervousness, tension, fear is expressing itself in the body, bringing mindfulness, investigation, interest energy, and focusing the attention. How is it in the body in relationship to your experience of unease or anxiety or worry or nervousness, tension, fear? Don't get caught up in the story. Don't keep going over the story. Just take a look in the body. How's it showing up? Sensorially. Not running away from it and not trying to fix it, but really taking an interest. How is this tension? How is this worry, this anxiety, this fear showing up in my body right now? Whether it's mild, medium, or strong. How is it? Notice how it moves and changes where it is. What happens to it? Is it solid? Is it static? Is it changing and moving? Noticing the pattern in your body. Where is it? Is that pattern familiar? Is there fear of it? Noticing this. And if there's fear of it, does that increase the experience of anxiety, worry, tension, fear? Recognizing. How is it? Now taking a look at the mind, the mental state, the mood, the emotional coloring in the mind of fear. The mental state, the mood, the emotional coloring in the mind of anxiety, worry, nervousness, tension. How is this? Really taking an interest. How is it? Not discussing it with yourself, but making a direct connection. How is it? Take your time, receiving these experiences that we often shut off to, run away from, ignore, pretend aren't happening, or feel completely caught and underwater with them. How is it in the body? How is it in the mind? There's no form of life on this planet that doesn't experience anxiety, worry, tension, fear in the body and in the mind. How is it? Not forcing anything, not forcing attention, receiving the experience rather than forcing your attention into it, receiving it. Are you able to notice the point at which the physical state and the mental state of fear is no longer present? Mindfully noticing this. Maybe no longer present for a moment, or maybe no longer present for a longer, more sustained period of time. Mindfully noticing any mental response or mental reaction to the bodily sensations or mental state of fear. Mindfulness of the mind. Developing these capacities is a great gift in your life. Overall, in any circumstance. Is it possible for equanimity, this balance and evenness of mind and heart, this quality of heart mind that remains centered without inclining towards one extreme or the other? Is it possible for equanimity to be present in relationship to the mental and physical experiences of fear or anxiety, nervousness, tension, worry? Notice this. Are you identified? Do you believe in and are identified with the physical and the mental reactions to fear, with the physical and mental experiences and then reactions to fear? Recognize this. More fear comes. Recognize this. Can you relax, open, and be receptive? Is it possible for equanimity to be present in relationship to the physical and mental state of anxiety or worry. Nervousness, tension, fear. And what happens if equanimity starts to make its way in? What is your experience then? What is your experience as a sense of evenness and balance of heart mind? As a sense of immeasurable impartiality begins to make its way in to your experience. And again, lastly, not forcing anything, letting go of expectations. Just being mindfully present, receptive, interested. And not analytically trying to fix it, trying to suss it out. Mindfully present, open, and interested to the direct experiences in your own experience, in your own way. How is it? Making the practice your own. And now for the last 5 minutes or so of the practice, letting go of worry, anxiety, tension, the various permutations of fear that you've been exploring, and letting go of any story that has come up to fuel these energies, and just letting it go, letting it be. And coming back to mindfulness of breathing at your touching point, your anapana spot, and simply being present, alert, connected to the sensations of an in-breath and an out-breath, relaxing and noticing. A gentle, light, investigative relationship, keeping it light, receptive, a lightness of being. A focus of attention, calm, tranquility, and ease of being. And letting the natural balance of mind and heart open up, receiving it. A sense of centeredness, well-being. Clarity and presence. May all of the wholesome energies and the fruits that manifest through our practice serve with immeasurable impartiality, without bias, without prejudice, towards the welfare, the happiness, and the awakening of all beings everywhere, which of course includes ourselves. So it's time now for some walking meditation or stretching meditation, which you can do sitting or standing, moving, staying very mindful. Please do move your body. We'll take 10 minutes. And allowing yourself to be embodied. So being aware of the movement, mindfully present in the movement, whether it's walking or sitting down or standing. And continuing to reconnect again and again with breath and with the quality or mood of the heart mind. How is it? And I'll ring the bell in 10 minutes and we'll come back together. Hello, everyone. I guess you're all here, I think. Hard to tell sometimes. Everybody's here. So I'd like to offer some Dhamma reflection regarding equanimity. So settling into your seat. Body, heart, mind relaxed, receptive, and ear doors open and receptive. And beginning with a poem by William Butler Yeats. We can make our minds so like still water that beings gather about us so that they see their own images and so live for a moment with a clearer, perhaps even a fiercer life because of our quiet. Here in Taos, New Mexico, where I live, we have what's considered to be a sacred mountain. And this sacred mountain is just one, actually, amongst many high mountains that surround the Taos Valley. This mountain is actually within the Taos Pueblo, the village of the Tiwa Indians that sits on the north edge of the town of Taos. And this particular mountain is sacred to the Tiwa people. It's also a sacred symbol for many Taoseños. And I have the great good fortune to be able to look out at it and to take it in any season, any time of the day or night, on any day of the year, as it's quite clearly visible from where I live. This mountain, any mountain, it just simply sits where it is. The sun shines on it, and rain and hail fall on it. Snow covers it, lightning strikes it sometimes. Fire occasionally rages on it. All sorts of life forms are born and die on it, living out their particular life patterns on and with the mountain. And the mountain remains unshakable, unwavering. The mountain of radical acceptance, the mountain of impartiality, the mountain of equanimity. The mountain itself is a live energy, but it only exists in relationship to all of the myriad, lively, constantly changing energies that constitute it. The mountain appropriately sustains and supports the activity that's intricately and intimately connected to it. The mountain of equanimity doesn't cling on. It isn't attached or averse to anything. We might say that it lets life live through itself, closing off to nothing and holding on to nothing. And all of this happens with the amazing grace of impartiality and balance. And so we begin our exploration of upekkha in Pali, equanimity in English. A very powerful force in our practice, a powerful force in the whole of our life. In the Buddhist teachings, it's included as one of the 10 paramis, one of the 10 perfections of character to be developed. It's also one of the 4 Brahmaviharas, one of the 4 divine abidings, which are metta, unconditional loving kindness and care, unconditional friendship, karuna, compassion, mudita, appreciative or empathetic joy, and the 4th of these divine abidings being equanimity. And upekkha is one of the 2 factors of mind that are present in the very deep and absorbed concentration of the 4th jhana, or the 4th level of concentration. And then last, but certainly not least, equanimity is the 7th, or the final, the last of the 7 factors of awakening, the last of the 7 factors of enlightenment that we've all been exploring for the last 7 weeks. During the second half of the 8th century in China, there was a civil war that ushered in famine and disease that was so devastating that 2 out of 3 Chinese people died. The population in this part of China shrunk by 2/3 in about 10 years. One of the great Chinese poets of the time, of this time, who lived in this particular area of China, wrote a poem that he called "The View This Spring." And this poem contained just 2 lines. And this is the poem. "The nation is destroyed. Mountains and rivers remain." What do the Buddhist teachings and practices have to offer us in times of stress and times of turbulence and uncertainty? I think that it's really quite a radical notion that we cultivate, that when we cultivate an equanimous heart-mind, even the most extreme external and also internal circumstances don't necessarily throw us off balance. What is equanimity? What isn't equanimity? How does it act? What are some of its results? Upekkha, equanimity, was the final factor to come into maturity before Siddhartha Gautama attained full awakening, attained full enlightenment, as he sat under the Bodhi tree on that now famous night, with an evenness and balance in his relaxed and powerful presence within his amazing grace, as though he were an immovable mountain, seeing things clearly and relinquishing, letting go, relinquishing every attachment to all formations of body and mind. And then breaking through to the great awakening, breaking through to the complete ending of suffering. Equanimity is the fearlessness, the power, and the equilibrium of the mind, the heart, to experience all kinds of change. The fearlessness, the power, and the balance of heart and mind to experience every sort of manifestation and change in relationship to all of our internal experiences and in relationship to all of the external phenomena that we encounter. whether these experiences are pleasant or unpleasant, as they arise, as they change, and as they pass away. Our practice offers us the possibility to more and more clearly observe, recognize, and look on with equanimity in relationship to our own body-mind process and in relationship to our world. Clearly seeing and knowing that things are always, always changing, always getting broken and mended and broken again. And yet there's also something that never breaks. So again, as our practice develops and deepens, we more clearly come to sense, see, and know that everything arises and everything falls away, coming and going all the time. And at the same time, we begin to sense, see, and know that in the moments of all of this, things go nowhere at all. Through our practice, we can grow into seeing and knowing all of this, not as two separate ways of seeing, but rather as one clear and seamless way, one seamless field of vision. The Buddha described what he called six-limbed equanimity, meaning equanimity in relationship to what comes in at each of the six sense doors: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and the mind door. This six-limbed equanimity was described as equanimity of one whose afflictive states, or cankers, as the Buddha often quite graphically called them, have been destroyed temporarily or destroyed completely, finally, and one who abides in the natural state of purity in relationship to desirable or undesirable objects that come into focus at any of the six sense doors. And some words from the Buddha. Here, a meditator whose cankers are destroyed is neither overjoyed nor distraught on seeing a visible object with the eye, hearing an audible sound with the ear, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. He dwells in equanimity, mindful, and fully aware. Equanimity is the fearlessness, great strength, and ease of the mind, the heart, to remain centered and unmoved in the midst of it all. The literal translation of upekkha, or equanimity, is on-looking. So equanimity looks on at the occurrence of physical and mental pleasure and pain by maintaining a neutral mode, by staying in the center, we could staying in the middle, watching things as they arise and as they pass. On looking, it sees them fairly, without any favoritism, without any bias, without partiality. So we could say that the function of equanimity is to inhibit partiality. Consequently, equanimity manifests as neutrality. Upekkha is the equipoise, the balance or equilibrium between the opposing forces in the mind of the desired and the undesired. This equipoise of upekkha offsets the weightiness of greed and the weightiness of aversion. It's that point of balance in the middle of the seesaw of life. The mind, the heart, doesn't move towards, nor does it move away. I remember as a child that I loved to find that point of balance when I was playing on the seesaw or the teeter-totter, as we called it, with another child. Both of us suspended perfectly balanced in our teeter-totter seat in mid-air. Maybe some of you experienced that. There was always for me a kind of happy and almost breathtaking feeling inside me in the moments when this happened. The poet T.S. Eliot said it quite beautifully. And this is his poem. At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is. But neither arrest nor movement, and do not call it fixity, where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline. Except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. This still point of equanimity is a place of protection, while at the same time being an experience of great spaciousness and strength of mind, great spaciousness and strength of heart. To bring a very practical understanding of this, we can use the metaphor, as the Buddha did, of putting a spoonful of salt into a cup of water. Because of the small container, the water will be extremely salty, quite harsh, undrinkable. But on the other hand, if we put a spoonful of salt into a large body of water, say the size of the Rio Grande River, which is the largest river here in New Mexico, it won't have the same effect, of course. Why? Because of the enormous amount of water, because of the great fluidity and spaciousness that the salt is poured into. And as each one of us knows, life can certainly be quite salty at times, right? It's just how it is. One aspect of the development of equanimity is about creating the spaciousness of mind and heart with which we can meet and look on at all of life's everyday experiences, as well as all the subtleties of the internal and external phenomena that we come to see and know through our practice. To look on with balance, to look on with equipoise, to look on with the heart of greatness, with what is called in the suttas, in relationship to equanimity as a factor of awakening, to look on with what's called specific neutrality. So what does this mean, specific neutrality? It means that whatever states of consciousness are present, which may be any of the three immeasurable qualities of mind and heart, of the divine abiding, say metta and compassion and mudita, or any of the 6 awakening factors of mind that we've been looking at: mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, and concentration, as well as other qualities of mind and heart, such as patience and faith. So in relationship to any and all of this, specific neutrality means that each and all of these states of heart and mind are met, experienced, and seen, looked on at evenly with neutrality through the balance of an equanimous heart-mind. There's a wonderful little book of teachings from the 12th century from Zen Master Dogen called How to Cook Your Life. How to Cook Your Life, where Dogen uses the work of the monastery cook and our relationships to food to teach us, in this case, about equanimity. And we, of course, can bring this teaching immediately close into our own life when we're home cooking for ourselves, cooking for friends, cooking for family. This is from Dogen. Handle even a single leaf of a green in such a way that it manifests the body of the Buddha. This in turn allows the Buddha to manifest through the leaf. This is a power you cannot grasp with your rational mind. It operates freely according to the situation in a most natural way. At the same time, this power functions in our lives to clarify and settle activities and is beneficial to all living beings. And he goes on, a dish is not necessarily superior because you have prepared it with choice ingredients, nor is a soup inferior because you have made it with ordinary greens. When handling and selecting greens, do so wholeheartedly with a pure mind and without trying to evaluate their quality, in the same way in which you would prepare a splendid feast. And he says, in practicing the Dharma, delicious and ordinary tastes are the same, not two. There's an old saying, the mouth of a monk, the mouth of a Dhamma student, the mouth of a meditator is like an oven. And what he means is, and it's the words come from his time, of course, just as an oven burns both sandalwood for incense and cow dung for cooking, without distinction, our mouths should be the same. There should be no distinction between delicious food and food which is plain and simple. We should be satisfied with whatever we receive. So, how to cook your mind from Dogen. How does one look on at the mind with equanimity? What contributes to this looking on in this way? What contributes to this capacity of relating to all things with equanimity? So a really simple example in relation to our meditation practice, and maybe in the sit today before this Dhamma reflection. You're sitting. And at one point you notice that the mind and the body are calm, maybe even serene and tranquil. And this is known. And you recognize that the focusing power of the mind, concentration, is evenly and is repeatedly connecting with whatever the object of attention is. Maybe the breath sensations or other sensations in the body. The mind isn't listless. The mind isn't agitated, but rather it's interested and appropriately energized. At times like this, there isn't any interest in or necessity for exerting, restraining, or encouraging the mind in any way. In relationship to our practice and in relationship to our life as our practice, just simply and clearly recognizing, acknowledging, and noting that this is what's occurring. That these factors of mind are in place for however long, maybe briefly, or maybe for a longer period of time. And very, very important, but not always so easy, doing this without any attachment or self-identification. This process and aspect of practice is actually something that contributes to the blossoming of the state of equanimity, consequently contributing to our capacity to relate to all things, to relate to all phenomena with equipoise and composure. During the time in the culture of the Buddha, his metaphor for the mind when it's in this mode was this: one is like a charioteer who looks with equanimity on horses progressing evenly. Well, that's probably not the case for most of us, or any of us, maybe. So in our case, the metaphor might be one is like the driver of a car who looks on with equanimity in a car that's running along evenly when it's set on cruise control. We're able to see and to know, we're able to take in what's in front of us and what's passing by with ease. And of course, as we all know from our own experience, our own life, and our meditation practice experience, until equanimity is really, truly matured, we lose and regain our balance over and over and over again. Quite a number of years ago, for the whole of the last 2 weeks of a long retreat that I was sitting, I practiced equanimity for those last 2 weeks. And I practiced it in the way that it's practiced as a divine abiding, as a Brahmavihara, silently repeating one equanimity phrase over and over and over again, day and night. First directing it to myself, and then on through all of the same categories that one uses for metta practice. The practice phrase that I used was this: I am the heir, or I am the owner of my own karma or kama, meaning I am the heir, the owner of my actions of mind, speech, and body. And the phrase went on: my happiness or suffering depends upon my actions, not upon my wishes for myself. I repeated this phrase hundreds and hundreds of times over 2 weeks, day and night. Well, by the end of those 2 weeks, there was quite a deep and quiet sense of balance and evenness and neutrality in the mind and the heart. A day or two before the end of the retreat, the thought came up, well, there's equanimity here. Seems to be a fairly deep and fairly abiding equanimity. And the next thought that came up was, I wonder if there's an equanimity test. If this were a Zen retreat, any good Zen teacher would do something creatively startling to check my equanimity. But this is a Vipassana retreat, and Vipassana teachers don't do things like that. And then all of those thoughts just disappeared. Well, later that day, that same day, I was startled in true Vipassana fashion, an equanimity test Vipassana style. I got a note that was signed by one of my equanimity teachers, though the note was actually from all 5 of the teachers that were teaching that retreat. And the note said, we would like you to give the Dana talk. We would like you to give the generosity talk to the retreatants tomorrow. Well, that was startling and shocking in the midst of my equanimity. I was not a Dharma teacher at that point. I had no intention to be a Dharma teacher at that point. And they were asking me to give a talk to 100 people. Well, for a moment, equanimity flew right out the window, and my heart felt like it stopped. And the old habit of fear flew right in. I can't do this now, said my old habit. I've been silent for so many weeks and so deeply into practice. I cannot get up in front of all my fellow retreatants and speak. It's absolutely impossible. I can't do it. And then the heart and the mind relaxed, and it recognized what had just occurred. And the thought came in, yes, this is my equanimity test. And I can do it, and I want to do it. And at that moment, a tremendous flood of gratitude came into the mind and heart. Gratitude for the teachers, gratitude for the retreat center staff, for the teachings, for the practice. And just as suddenly as it had disappeared, equanimity was back. What I was being asked to do felt like the most natural thing in the world to be doing at that point. So again, until equanimity has matured, we lose and we regain the balance and equipoise of equanimity over and over and over again. Upekkha manifests as quieting fear, quieting dislike, resentment, and the self-judgment that can sometimes manifest as guilt or disapproval, and the feeling that I'm not good enough. It also manifests as quieting liking, pride, attachment, and the judgment of approval in relationship to what we think of as ourself, me, my experiences. Equanimity also manifests in quieting the attachment or the fear that comes up in relationship to others. When equanimity has arisen and it's developing, in those moments, fear, resentment, attachment, and identification, along with the judgments of approval or disapproval, all of that subsides. Within the clear space of a momentary or longer, really true neutrality, there's nothing for greed and nothing for aversion to stick to when they arise. And I'm sure that every one of us has experienced the pretense of equanimity within ourselves in the midst of greed or dislike, in the midst of resentment or anger or fear or disappointment. The glossing over or ignoring these states and pretending to ourselves, the pretense of equanimity. Well, it doesn't really matter. This doesn't really matter, that kind of an attitude. Or, well, it's all just fine, really, it's all just fine. Or, well, I'm totally fine, I'm just fine. All of these things that we tell ourselves, often accompanied maybe by a slight or maybe not so slight moving away from a mental and a physical contraction, which is not equanimity, but is actually indifference. Indifference being the near enemy of equanimity. Indifference masquerading as upekkha. Indifference is actually a state of separation in relationship to ourselves and in relationship to whoever or whatever we're around. And of course, We also know from our own experience that when we're really inflamed with greed and dislike and anger and fear, or disappointment or resentment, it's extremely difficult, or maybe not even the least bit possible, to look on at those moments with a true equanimity. Upekkha is based in an attentive, clear presence of mind, not on dullness or indifference. And it's not a kind of casual passing mood, nor is it produced by exertion, and it is not created by the intellect. It's the result of, it's one of the fruits of our practice. The fruit of training the mind, training the heart through the development and the blossoming of the factors of mindfulness, investigation, a balanced effort, joy, tranquility, and concentration, along with the heart qualities of loving kindness and compassion. True equanimity is our capacity to meet all of the vicissitudes of life, what the Buddha called the 8 worldly winds: praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame or distinction, and disrepute or disrespect or disregard. These flip-flops which come our way throughout our life. True equanimity is our capacity to meet all of this with a heart, a mind that's strong, fearless, centered, and at ease. True equanimity is able to meet these worldly winds, as the Buddha called them, which we, as we each know, may sometimes feel like pretty harsh tests. But equanimity is quickly able to regenerate its strength from our inner resources, the resources that have been developed through our diligent practice. And some words from the Buddha. Develop the mind of equilibrium. You will always be getting praise and blame. But do not let either affect the poise of the mind. Follow the calmness, the absence of pride. There's an amazing practice that was occasionally practiced by the Hopi Indians. I don't know that they do it anymore. And I don't recommend this practice. But we can take it as a metaphor for us in relationship to the cultivation and the manifestation of the power of fearlessness, evenness of mind and heart, and the protection that is one of the great strengths of equanimity. And this is from a book by Frank Waters called The Book of the Hopi, as was told to him by Koahuaima. And this is from the book, directly from the book. There were all kinds of snakes: rattlesnakes, big bull snakes, racers, sidewinders, gopher snakes, about 60, all tangled on the floor. The singing stirred them. They moved in one direction, then another, looking over all the men in the circle. The men never moved. They just kept singing with a kind expression on their faces. The snakes began to roll in the sand, taking their bath. Then a big yellow rattler moved towards an old man sitting with his eyes closed, climbed up his crossed leg, coiled in front of his breechcloth, and went to sleep. Pretty soon, this old man had 5 or 6 snakes crawling over his body, raising their head to look at his closed eyes and peaceful face, then going to sleep. It showed that they had found their friend, looking within the heart of this one upon whose body they chose to rest. That is the way snakes show who are good and kind men with pure hearts. Don't try the practice, please. True equanimity will possess the power of protection and a wholesome resistance in relationship to the mind, the heart, getting seduced by and caught up in states of fear, greed, and aversion. It also possesses the power of renewing itself, but only if it's deeply rooted in a growing insight into the true nature of things. One of the particular insights that I'd like to spend just a little bit of time exploring with you today is that as it develops and eventually ripens into insight is one of the primary roots of equanimity. And this is our growing clarity in understanding how the vicissitudes, how the 8 worldly winds of life, how they originate, how they come to be. And this is the understanding of karma, or kama in Pali. The understanding that the various experiences of stress, of suffering, and the experiences of ease are the result of our kama, meaning the results of our actions, thought, speech, and deed, right here and now, and then on back and back and back. This is kama or karma. This is our kama. We're born. We spring out of the womb of kama. And even though we may or may not like it at times, we are undeniably the heirs of our kama. So for instance, just as soon as we've spoken words or performed any action, we've totally lost control over it. And yet it remains with us. And in some way, inevitably returns to us as our due inheritance, we could say. And I know that this can sometimes be uncomfortable to hear. So please listen carefully, listen mindfully, and please hear me out. We could say that everything that happens and the ease or dis-ease that is in our heart, mind, is the outcome of our own mind's relationship to all of the happenings in life, internally and externally. Our suffering and our happiness in this life at any given moment is due to our own mind, not due to our wishes for ourselves, and not due to some other person or some outer antagonistic or seemingly strange or foreign world. As this understanding takes root in us, it actually has the power to free us from fear. And so is the first basis of equanimity. When in fact, with everything that happens around us and within us, we begin to see that we only meet ourselves, what is there to fear? The heart begins to relax. And we begin to know that we can change our mind. That in fact, we're not trapped on the karmic wheel running around and around like a little mouse. We begin to know that we can act in skillful ways from a place of heart, mind, balance, and fearlessness. But of course, as we've all experienced, fear, uncertainty, and insecurity arise along the way. And at the same time, as we traverse this path, we clearly begin to see and to know that the refuge where fear can be dispelled is through our good deeds. Refuge from this perspective is in wholesome thought, wholesome motivations, wholesome words, and performing wholesome actions. As we take this refuge, there comes to be a growing confidence in the great protecting power of good deeds that we've done in the past, and a growing courage to perform more and more wholesome deeds right now, even in the midst of what might be some hardship in our current life. Our practice itself, this incredible training of the heart mind, is a very good deed, really the very best deed, and the essential ground for the blossoming of wholesomeness in through all aspects of our life. One of the things that's been really important for me in understanding karma is that it's always the right time to perform wholesome actions. It's always the right time to do good deeds. It's never too late, never. And so we practice this. And it becomes established in us. And it becomes a refuge. And at some point we know for sure, as was said by one of the Buddha's disciples, more and more ceases the misery and evil rooted in the past. And this present life, I try to make it spotless and pure. What else then can the future bring other than an increase of the good? As this becomes more and more certainty in our heart and mind, the mind becomes more tranquil, more serene. And we gain the great strength of a patient heart and the evenness and balance of equanimity in relationship to the various challenges and difficulties in our practice and in our life as a whole. Along the way of our practice, with the development and blossoming of a growing degree of equanimity, which the Buddha called relative equanimity, we find that we in fact then have the strength to endure when we need that, when we need to endure, and to see clearly when that's what's being called for. We have the possibility of not continuing to blindly fall into the same holes over and over and over again, but to begin to walk down a different street. The understanding of karma can imbue us with a powerful motivation to free ourselves from karma, to free ourselves from the actions that again and again and again throw us into repeated suffering. At some point along the way of our practice, equanimity will evolve from being relative equanimity to absolute equanimity. In the progress of insight, when equanimity is strong, fulfilled, and mature, concentration and insight, concentration and understanding occur coupled together without either one exceeding the other, along with an imbalance with all of the factors of awakening. With all of these occurring at that point with what has been called a single taste. The single taste of liberation, the single taste of deliverance from suffering. Every moment Every circumstance is another opportunity to experience things as they are, rather than as we wish or as we fear them to be. As we drop more deeply into the presence and the wisdom within our own heart mind of equanimity in relationship to the way of things, we're rendered free to use this great treasure to respond rather than react to the life within us and the life around us. As Buddhist teacher Joan Sutherland said, it is our freedom to fall willingly into the frightened, blasted, beautiful, tender world as it is. To know ourselves that we have that treasure and that we're free to use it, no matter the circumstances. And a short piece from the Buddha, from the Udana, the inspired utterances of the Buddha, whose mind stands like a mountain, steady, it is not perturbed, unattached to things that arouse attachment, unangered by things that provoke anger. When her or his mind is cultivated thus, how can suffering come to her? How can suffering come to him? And closing today's reflection with a poem from William Stafford called The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. And let's sit quietly for just a few moments. Thank you for listening to the Dhamma, and thank you for your practice.